Hello, and welcome to the latest in the series of podcasts from Neurodiversity in Business. My name's Dan Harris. I'm the founder and CEO, and Neurodiversity in Business is an industry forum which launched in Parliament in March 2022. And I'm really delighted to be welcoming today Hannah Grace, who is an HR advisor at the London Stock Exchange Group, really well-known and respected financial services institution in London. Hannah, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, yes, so I'm Hannah. Again, as Dan said, I'm a HR advisor at the London Stock Exchange Group, and I'm really excited to be here today to talk more about neurodiversity.
Great, thanks, Hannah. And I'll just talk a little bit about how we met, first of all. So obviously we launched in Parliament and we had a great kind of launch with the great and the good from across the ND ecosystem. And then we had a bit of a celebration the next day, which was we had the privilege of ringing the bell at the London Stock Exchange for the opening ceremony. So that was really exciting. And as part of that, we had pretty good kind of publicity across the building, didn't we? We had all the boards with neurodiversity business, and it was very, very high tech and professional. And you know, you didn't know about us before, but just tell us about kind of how you came about us.
So I actually saw a couple of posts on LinkedIn, and it was about a couple of weeks prior, actually. So when I had my diagnosis, I kind of just looked around, seeing what support networks there were or platforms. And this is one I found. And then as soon as I walked into the building on a casual Wednesday morning on the way to work, I saw, the logo on the cube, the ever famous cube, and all of the boards around. And I thought, I recognise that. Oh my goodness, that's NiB. So I thought, do you know what? I'm going to take a picture because it's really lovely to see that. And it was just one of those moments where I was going through a bit of a tough time in the early few months with my diagnosis. And to see that in such a corporate environment, it was like a breath of fresh air, because you don't really see, and I mean, going backwards in time, it's not really been a talked about thing in the workplace, for adults or children, really. And yeah, it's just such a breath of fresh air to see that businesses are looking to look more into it, look how they can support their employees. And I think where it seems, it seems a bit new. However, it's great to see that businesses are now getting involved, with any type of disability, whether it be mental or physical. It's great to see that we've got, people championing that.
Yeah, and I remember actually receiving your message, and I think I was pretty tired, exhausted after 2 crazy busy days. But actually, when I got your message, it filled me with real energy and positivity, because it was so impactful for a neurodivergent employee in a big corporate space to actually feel associated with and supported. So yeah, no, thank you for reaching out. That was really great.
Thank you.
And so just tell us a little bit about yourself, because you're obviously, very successful. You're working for an amazing organization, and you sit in HR. And tell us a little bit about your route to diagnosis and how you've come into kind of employment, etc.
So initially, let's just go back to when I was 14 years of age. I was actually diagnosed with ADHD. However, way back when, this is going back 14 years now, so it was a very different time with mental health issues. Now, it was more of a thing of the boys had ADHD because they displayed more of the hyperactive, traits, and the girls were typically a lot more introverted, so they displayed more of inattentive traits. Now, because of that, the girls were often diagnosed with autism and the boys with ADHD. And I remember initially at my assessments that one of the nurses said to me, well, actually, I think you've got autism. And then another, we kind of got a second opinion. And they said, no, look, this is very clear ADHD. It's very clear combined ADHD, actually. So displaying both of the hyperactive and the inattentive traits. So I swept it under the rug, being a very typical 14-year-old that wanted to fit in with everybody at school. You're at that age, you're in year 9, you're at the height of your puberty. And it was uncool. You would be bullied for things like that. So I did just sweep it under the rug, and I thought, do you know what, I'm going to deal with this myself. It is what it is. Not really understanding it, even still as a teenager. I didn't really understand how it really did play a massive part in affecting me. So all the way through life, leading up to the end of last year, there's been a lot of things that I've missed, and it did become very apparent, particularly with COVID. So working from home, that was one thing that really made this become apparent to me, with my working style, relationships with friends, things like that. So that led me to get re-diagnosed, and it actually came off of the back of my terrible sleeping pattern, that we kind of looked into it and said, you know what, let's just re-go through the system again. So I was fortunate enough to get that very quickly at the end of last year. In employment, I think it's been very difficult, and I think a lot of people relate to the case of, dependent on, you know, what type of ADHD you might have, or any other kind of neurodivergent you might have. So for example, if you're really enjoying a job, you're going to want to stay there, right? Or if you're not enjoying a job, you might not be able to apply yourself as much. So I've definitely had a bit of that in the past, and it's been a roller coaster, really trying to find the right job for me. And it just so happened that HR was that right thing for me. And what I found with being here, you know, going into a massive corporate environment, even when I first started here 2 years ago, of course, I didn't really think about ADHD. It was not at the forefront of my mind. Um, but yeah, I mean, going along, I've had some hiccups, just like many people, and kind of being, you know, really open with my line manager about what I was potentially dealing with up to getting that diagnosis. And she was so, so supportive. And at first, it all runs through your head, you know, am I going to get sacked? They're going to think I can't do my job. You know, typically I work in HR. I should be setting an example here about what people should be. Maybe they don't want, you know, a crazy person with ADHD dealing with, you know, their staff. But again, it's one of those things where you're overthinking things, and it's fine. You know, I can do my job. I'm very able and capable, just like any other person. So, and yeah, I think it's been difficult, but as well, it's been very, very rewarding at the same time.
Yeah. Well, look, I just want to say something on a personal note. You are setting an example, and the example you're setting is one of being a role model. So you should
Yeah,
be very proud of what you're doing, and particularly
thank you.
it takes a lot of bravery and honesty to speak up on this topic. But what I think we've seen is people are doing that these days, aren't they, Hannah? That, you know, people are saying, look, I'm neurodivergent, and these are the qualities I bring to my work.
Yeah,
So that's super powerful. I also recognise, and you'll probably want to touch on this a bit more, is that acute underdiagnosis for females around ADHD, also for autism and other conditions. But that's really disappointing, isn't it, in 2022, that
it is.
females are so disadvantaged going through the education system and the medical system, that they're misdiagnosed or underdiagnosed. So just tell us about kind of, you originally got diagnosed, and then, as you said, you kind of put it to the side. And what we're hoping is young girls and young ladies in the future can kind of see you as an example, and actually say, no, I'm going to embrace this, and I'm going to talk to the world about this.
Absolutely. So I think it boils down, I think, to possibly acceptance as well. So accepting, you know, that you might be dealing with something, and that's great. And yes, it can be a negative, and it can also be a positive. And I think talking to people and being open about how you feel, because I think as well, a lot of people, you know, autistic, ADHD, and many other neurodivergencies, we tend to bottle things up, and it is quite difficult to speak, you know, and neurotypicals are the same, I guess, as well in certain aspects. But I think doing that is super important, and that is the road to diagnosis. But I think because there is such, well, at the moment, I think a lot of people are saying, you know, oh, this, you know, everyone's jumping on the bandwagon and getting a diagnosis. Well, actually, a lot of people are underdiagnosed. And I think it's because there's not a lot of education around neurodivergent, or neurodivergencies. And that's because, again, I think it's a little bit of a newer thing, that now we're recognizing it a lot more than what we were, you know, 10 odd years ago. And even myself, I did not understand, you know, hyperactive, you're bouncing off the walls, you talk over people, you talk really, really fast. Okay, yes, I display all of those things, which is fine. But it affects you in everyday life, in every different scenario. And nobody really knows about this until you are really educated. And I'm still learning now about all of these things that affect me. So I think with a better education system surrounding neurodiversity, you will get more diagnoses, more people being diagnosed, should I say. And yeah, I mean, there's in school particularly, I think it's harder because people are growing up and they're being faced with school exams and things like that. And the last thing they're really looking for is to, you know, dealing with everything else outside of school emotionally is quite difficult. But on top of that, I think, you know, girls are a lot less diagnosed than what boys are, because boys in school, they're quite loud, they can be really naughty, and I think that's where the understimulation comes in. When you're not stimulated, your brain is looking for ways to stimulate you, so you might want to make someone laugh, you know, and it makes you feel good. Whereas girls, you know, they might be doing something else, they might be being distracted, they might be jotting in their notebook, not listening, not paying attention. So that's where I think it differs a lot, and that's where it might come down to she doesn't care, things like that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of stigma around women with getting diagnosed massively.
Yeah. And there were some great people in this space who were shouting about this really loudly. So I'm sure you'll have seen on LinkedIn Ellie Middleton, who's doing an amazing job.
Yeah.
Also Sam Hugh, ADHD Girls. So there's an increasing kind of coalition around this topic, which is great to see. So clearly you went through your educational journey, then you arrived in employment. Can you just tell me a little bit, if you're comfortable to, about your kind of self-disclosure then? How did that process work? Who did you say, who did you talk to?
In school, do you know what, I can't remember what they're called now, but there were, I think, when people had learning difficulties and things like that, they would go to somebody sometimes on a Tuesday afternoon, let's just say, for some private coaching, or they would do anger management, things like that. And weirdly, I was sent to this woman for anger management, and I don't really think I was angry visibly,
Right.
from memory, but I may have probably displayed some frustration, specifically if I didn't understand something perhaps, or I just couldn't get it. Now, I actually spoke to her at first because I remember crying and saying, look, I can't apply myself in lessons that I hate, maths being one of them. And my mum as well. So mum was very close to the process and she went for it with me. She used to take me to all of my assessments and my appointments, things like that. So it was those two individuals that I really confided in about, you know, the way I felt. I felt different. I felt like a bit of an outcast. I didn't really know where I fitted in terms of things. And it was quite frustrating. So those are the people that I kind of disclosed to. And actually the lady or the teacher, she knew that I wasn't really getting on well in year 10 and 11 when it came to doing the GCSEs. I couldn't apply myself to certain things. In some lessons, I was really flying high. I was getting quite high grades. And in others, I was not even being able to be graded, which was an ultimate just scream out, just to, as this is clear as day, really. Um, and she actually said to me, you know, I think we should send you home for the rest of the year. You know, we're not kicking you out of school, we're just sending you home. You can work from home and you can do all of the rest of your subjects at home. Um, and I think that helped a lot, being away from, you know, the distraction, being away from the subjects that I didn't really favour, and I could do things in my own time without all this pressure. And yeah, they're the two kind of main people that I confided in those early stages.
And then what about when you got into employment then? How was that journey? Who did you confide in, and what's it been like since?
Employment, I never confided in anyone until last year. So in the previous role in the company that I'm in now, so I had my manager, and I had to speak to her about these ongoing issues. And the reason being was because I was going through a bit of a stage where I couldn't identify burnout. So during burnout, I would make all of these careless mistakes. I would have these frequent little meltdowns that I call them, because I just couldn't cope with things that I could do on another day when I was feeling fine. But during this period, anything that came in, it just seemed too much. It seemed like everything on the screen was French, so it was quite overwhelming. And just this really simple email, these simple instructions, I just couldn't get through. So I had to just be honest, because it came across that I probably was just being careless. Um, And we went through it together. You know, we had regular calls together every week to see how I was feeling, just to, you know, and that was a chance for me as well to learn how to be open and have that open dialogue, because I didn't before. I kept everything in. Um, and ever since then, I felt a lot more comfortable at work. I felt like I can actually do my job properly. And we've actually learned and taught me how to set my own boundaries as well, which I didn't have before. I used to take on so much to the point where I would overcompensate for looking like I'm not doing enough. Um, so yeah, I mean, that was my biggest support network, and my current manager as well was absolutely brilliant. And also, I decided to tell my colleagues in my direct team before I posted about it on LinkedIn, and they were really supportive as well, because as soon as I was diagnosed, I was put on medication, and you know, completely different experience. You know, I wasn't really there mentally, so I had to tell people, because they probably would have, you know, thought, what's up with Hannah? Why is she being weird? But yeah, I mean, they were absolutely brilliant with everything.
Great. Well, look, that's really heartening to hear, isn't it? Because I think
Yeah,
this sets an example for those people who are not able to bring their authentic self to work. Actually, you know, this
yeah.
is a great example where an organisation is willing to support and encourage and look after their teammates. So I'm really pleased to hear that. Just tell me about kind of how you see the corporate world supporting neurodiversity then. So what kind of drew you to neurodiversity in business, and what are your hopes and wishes there?
So I think it's a really great concept and a great charity, because what it does, I think we're essentially going to be teaching and coaching businesses to get involved and really embrace, you know, their neurodivergent employees. And I feel that, again, a lot of us has probably felt quite separated, quite shut out from, you know, neurotypical people. So perhaps this is a really great time to, you know, get those neurodivergent people really involved in something, and also be the voice of it. Um, I find that, you know, businesses are run by people, and we need to educate those people. So I think there's still a lot of learning there. And I think it's great, you know, for people that are in these businesses to get involved that are neurodivergent, because they can then get some direct feedback from those that are actually neurodivergent. Because,
Right.
you know, of course, I find that, and it is wonderful, we've got neurotypical people you know, running these things, but we need the neurodivergent people to actually say, yes, do you know what, this might work, this might not work, because, and that's a learning thing as well, I think. I think there's still a lot of work to do in terms of, you know, how, you know, just general things such as, you know, office setups, layouts, things like that, because there's some things that people might not think of that actually quite, you know, it can affect a neurodivergent person, such as, you know, hot desking, I find can be quite troublesome for a lot of neurodivergent people. So these simple things I think need to be thought of, but it's going in such a good direction, and it's making people feel included. And this is a main, you know, one of the biggest goals, I think, is to make people feel included, raise awareness, and really embrace, you know, all types of people that we have in the world.
Yeah. Well, Hannah, I'll conclude with saying credit to you. It's really inspiring to me personally that people like you are speaking out, and you know, I've seen your career, and it's, you know, going in an excellent direction, and you're a very high-powered financial services institution that is respected across the world. So credit to you. Thank you so much for speaking out. And I would say to the kind of young females and males as well that are maybe kind of going through that diagnosis route on ADHD, I think this is a great example of where you know, success can be at the end of this journey, not to be disheartened, to kind of really just aim for the stars, right? Not kind of
Mm,
allow yourself to get disengaged from the education process, which
yes.
then inhibits you for your later career. Because you know, the statistics are stark, aren't they, Hannah, in terms of the employment
Mhm.
rates for people who are neurodivergent. And
Yeah.
if we say that perhaps kind of 3 to 5% of the population are ADHD, then actually that's a really significant number for businesses to think about, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. All right, Hannah. Well, look, it's been really lovely to talk to you. I'm sure we will have lots of young female, in particular ADHD, people who will want to get in touch and kind of get your advice. So be aware that that may come your way soon.
Yeah, absolutely. No, more, it's more than welcomed.
Excellent. And thanks for being such a great role model, Hannah. And
Thank
we'll look
you.
forward to speaking to you again one day.
Absolutely amazing. Thank you so much, Dan.
Bye.
Bye.